A disconnected phone starts ringing again. In the first film, it was a warning. In the second, it becomes an attempt to explain the unexplainable. The Black Phone and The Black Phone 2 show how a precise horror concept can evolve, and how it can collapse when the studio decides to expand the universe. The first movie doesn't rely on plot. It relies on spatial direction. Garrickson locks the camera inside four walls and tests how long the audience can endure the lack of air. Every shot is built as a stretched pause. Nothing happens, and that is exactly why it's frightening. The grabber isn't explained, analyzed, or justified. He simply exists. Silence becomes the main dramatic tool, and the film treats it with discipline. Remove the silence, and the whole structure collapses. Ethan Hawke does something unusual. He plays fear without leaning on madman tropes. He avoids theatrics. His threat comes from how normal he looks. The mask changes its lower and upper halves, not as an effect, but as a visual language of dominance. The upper part is deception. The lower part is control. Critics compare this approach to Demi's work in The Silence of the Lambs, not because of the genre, but because both films weaponize emptiness. This is why The Black Phone feels complete. It trusts the viewer to fill the gaps. The second film violates the rules the first one established. What used to be a suggestion becomes literal mechanics. The dead now intervene physically, hitting, injuring, influencing. Once the supernatural starts behaving like a system, the fear becomes explainable. And explainable fear is safe fear. That undermines the emotional core of the original. The sequel suffers from studio anxiety. Everything must be explained. The FBI, the van, the relationships between victims, these are procedural elements that interrupt the psychological tension. The film shifts from a personal nightmare to a broad investigation. Paradoxically, the more answers it provides, the weaker the suspense becomes. Visually, the movie remains strong. Snow, cold light, smart framing, but aesthetics start replacing substance. Even critics who dislike the sequel admit that the atmosphere and score still work. Mark Corvin composes not themes, but impulses, short, sharp signals that keep the nerves active. When the plot loses tension, the sound pulls it back. The young actors remain committed, especially Madeline McGraw. Her arc of belief and doubt is stronger than the script she was given. Both films share an unspoken theme: communication between worlds. The Phone isn't just supernatural. It's a metaphor for unresolved trauma. In the first film, the child learns to hear the voices adults ignore. In the second, adults begin hearing the dead, but only when it's too late. The grabber is not a demon. He is a medium, testing who among the living can feel the echo of someone else's pain. That's why blood is scarce. Derrickson films not death, but the resonance of fear. The problem is that in the sequel, that subtle echo becomes noise. The Black Phone is one of the few modern horrors where tension comes from restraint, not volume. The Black Phone 2 is an example of how explaining the myth can dilute the myth itself. The first film is sharp and disciplined. The second is visually impressive, but loses its center. The phone still rings, but now it sounds more like a marketing decision. Horror is always about choice. Do you trust the voice behind the wall, or do you turn the volume down? One film invites you into silence. The other pushes you into noise. The real question is, when that phone rings again, will you answer?